Talk about my mom, you little punk.
Fallout 3 pretty much had me right on board from the moment you said the guys what made Oblivion are going to make a post-apocalyptic game. You know, kind of regardless of whether it had the Fallout name on it or not, that's a really exciting proposition. And sure enough, the game is largely Oblivion set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland with some of the Fallout stuff sprinkled on top. That's awesome, but also a lot of time has passed since Oblivion came out, and some of the stuff that was really impressive back then doesn't hold up quite as well now. So there are a few things that don't work out quite as well as I probably would have hoped. The game's story opens with your character being born. You're being born in an underground vault where people are living to avoid the nuclear fallout and radiation that's taking place on the surface. By starting with your character's birth, you actually get to choose the gender and the look of your character right then and there. And there's a whole prologue taking place inside the vault where you kind of determine what your skill sets are going to be and kind of what numbers you want to put into these different RPG-style statistics.
Happy birthday, pal. I can't believe you're already 10.
During the course of this prologue, you're introduced to your father, and you kind of see what he's all about. And then the prologue takes a very sharp turn as your father escapes the vault. The guy running the vault doesn't like it when people escape, and he's sent people after you with big sticks to kind of, you know, beat some information out of you. So you escape as well, trying to find your father and trying to figure out what the hell is going on. But once you get outside the vault, the choices are really up to you. There are a lot of different side quests you can find, and the Fallout world, which takes place around the rubble surrounding the Washington, D.C. area, is very large. You'll encounter side quests along the way. Some of these have, you know, some pretty big consequences depending on how you act. And there'll be some other side quests that you probably won't encounter at all unless you very specifically look up where they are and try and go find them yourself. Along the way, you'll always have that main quest involving your father and his work and where he's going and what he's doing. So you'll always kind of have a compass pointing you in that direction as well. With that kind of open nature, the number of hours you'll spend playing Fallout 3 varies entirely depending on what you find interesting. It's just kind of weird that you could actually skip 90% of that if you wanted to.
Don't hit me.
I spent 25 hours playing the game my first time through, and that was completing most of those side quests that I encountered and getting to the end of the story. It seems like the game could be double that if you seek out every other little side quest, or even, you know, double that if you just want to wander around the wasteland and see what there is to see. It's a large world with kind of a lot to find, but not all that stuff automatically ties into the gameplay, and really the wasteland is aptly named because outside of the downtown area where you see a lot of rubble and buildings that you can enter that have been torn apart and stuff like that, it's flat. It's a wasteland.
Well now, that's a surprise. Don't hit me.
The big thing about all of the quests in Fallout 3 is how you solve them. There are a number of different ways to go about a lot of the situations, and some of these will be determined by your character's statistics. But for the most part, it's whether you want to do things the good way or the evil way. And then in addition to that, the violent way or the non-violent way. All of this weighs on your karma, which will kind of serve as an indicator of how people will approach you. If you have a high karma, you know, good characters, when they approach you, might just kind of make some offhand comment of like, you got a look about you, I think you're okay, or like, I don't know, man. That doesn't really seem to play into things a whole lot. There are some followers and some people like sidekicks and stuff that you can pick up that you might not be able to pick up if your karma is one way or the other. But by and large, it's just kind of different dialogue options and, you know, like I said, whether you want to gun people down or be their friends.
My God, you're a cold-blooded little shit, aren't you?
Speaking of gunning people down, there are a lot of opportunities for combat in this game. You'll occasionally get jumped by raiders, which are, you know, just scavenging dudes, radioactive mole rats or dogs or, you know, other weird-looking creatures that you find. And a lot of these same creatures are the same dudes you'll find underground in the various like metro tunnels and buildings and dungeons that you'll go into for quests. The combat in the game is all right. I didn't really find it satisfying as an action-style shooter or as kind of a role-playing game with shooting in it. And that's because your shots are governed by dice throws. You would be pointing at a character's head, pull the trigger, you'll see kind of bullets going around them. It's not really satisfying. That being said, you can also use something called VATS. And VATS is a system that actually lets you pause the game, and this is kind of like one of the things that's been thrown in to make it seem a little more like the old Fallout game, where you take a set of action points, pause the game, and spend those action points on doing things like shooting guys. This resulted in me playing almost every single sequence with a shotgun, running up as close as I could get to the guy, hitting the VATS button, which freezes everything, pointing at the guy's head, saying, shoot at this man's head until I'm out of action points, and then unfreezing it, which causes some slow motion, just, you know.
Ow!
If you end up killing a guy in one hit and still have enough for 2 shots after that, you can just hit the button again, point at the next guy, repeat the process. So if you find yourself not really into the action, real-time combat, you can play most of the game just by doing this and never really have to aim. You just kind of get up close, do your business, and move on. Probably the best thing about Fallout 3 are the characters that you meet along the way. Everyone who has a name that you encounter for, you know, a specific purpose seems to have a specific voice, and these characters come through a lot better than they did in Oblivion, and a lot better than they do in some other RPGs overall. You'll meet a lot of interesting people along the way, like Three Dog, who runs this radio station.
I am Three Dog, jockey of discs and teller of truths.
You have a wrist computer, and you can tune into radio stations along the way and just kind of listen to him kind of giving the news of the world. So it was something that I found I would just tune into every couple hours, like, oh, let's see what this guy's saying. He would say something about what I was doing or where I was going, and then I'd turn it back off because it's like, it seems like there's like 2 or 3 songs on that entire station. Graphically, probably the most impressive thing about Fallout 3 is when you first exit the vault. You're coming out of the vault and, you know, you've been born underground and haven't really seen the sun in, you know, 20 years of being alive. So you come out and everything's white and kind of fades into view, and you realize how far you can see. Granted, it's a flat wasteland with not a lot on it, but the view distance is really impressive and gives you a real good sense of scope of like, wow, this is a really big world. And that's really cool. You really get a sense of like, you know, I'm actually traveling large distances and doing stuff. Unfortunately, that's mostly just you holding forward as the thing gets into view because it's a wasteland. There's not a lot going on out there, but it's still really impressive to see in action. When you go underground, you know, you enter a lot of metro tunnels, a lot of train stations, a lot of things like that. And while you don't really get the feeling that a lot of things are being reused, the indoor areas are probably a little bit less impressive than when you're outdoors kind of seeing all this stuff, or when you're in a town like Megaton and seeing like all these different buildings that have been cobbled together out of scrap and stuff like that. So there's some really impressive set pieces, but really just the size and the scope of everything is kind of what gives it that graphical oomph.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Fallout 3 is not perfect. It definitely has a lot of issues, kind of both small in size and medium in size, that I think a lot of people are going to be tripped up on and be like, oh, you know, if they had just gotten this right, if they had just gotten this right. Fortunately, it's easy enough to look past a lot of those and still have a really exciting time with the overall experience. When you factor in the number of hours you could spend seeking out every little side quest, or, you know, maybe retrying some of the moral choices to see, you know, how much more humor and fun you can have playing as an evil character compared to a good one, there's enough here to do and see to keep you excited from start to finish.
That's not a toy. Whoa, that stings. Ow!
Don't hit me.